When Nazi Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, a strange silence fell over the North Atlantic. For years, U-boats had stalked the oceans, hunting convoys, slipping beneath the waves, and vanishing into the dark. But now, scattered across thousands of miles of ocean, more than 100 German submarines were still at sea, and none of them knew how the war had ended. Then the order came. Admiral Karl Donitz, Hitler's chosen successor and once the mastermind of the U-boat fleet, issued a simple, historic command. All U-boats are to cease operations, surface immediately, and surrender to the nearest Allied authority. For submariners who'd lived months in cramped, airless hulls, it was a surreal moment. Across the North Atlantic, in the Bay of Biscay, in the fjords of Norway, steel giants began to rise. One by one, U-boats broke the surface, their crews climbing out into the open air, some for the first time in weeks. Allied aircraft circled overhead, watching as men who had once hunted them now raised white flags. These submarines, once the terror of Allied shipping, slowly steamed toward their designated surrender ports: Loch Erball in Scotland, Lisa Halley in Northern Ireland, Portland in southern England. Each arrival marked the quiet collapse of the famed wolf packs, the submarine groups that had once threatened to starve Britain into submission. The war beneath the waves was over, but what came next would be unlike anything the world had ever seen. As U-boats arrived in the Allied ports, the surrender turned from spectacle to procedure. Allied ships shepherded the German vessels into harbor, making sure no one attempted sabotage or escape. Once anchored, boarding parties climbed across the narrow decks, armed, wary, and methodical. For the German crews, it was the first time they stood face to face with the men they had fought for years. Officers seized code books, Enigma machines, charts, and torpedoes. Engineers went straight to work, inspecting the battle-worn hulls. Many of the U-boats were barely seaworthy. Rust streaked their sides and their engines sputtered to life only reluctantly. At Loch Erball in Scotland, the scene was surreal. Nearly 40 U-boats anchored side by side, their conning towers jutting from the water like a forest of steel. It was the largest mass surrender of submarines the world had ever seen. But the logistics were overwhelming. Some submarines had to be towed from French and Norwegian ports. Others broke down mid-transit. A few never made it at all, sinking from mechanical failure or deliberate sabotage as crews tried to destroy sensitive equipment before capture. Still, day after day, more U-boats arrived, waiting for the Allies to decide their fate. By late 1945, Allied ports were overflowing with surrendered U-boats. What do you do with the world's most advanced submarine fleet when it no longer had a country to serve? Inside Allied command rooms, the debate began immediately. The United States and Britain understood the value of what they had captured. The latest German designs, especially the Type 21, were unlike anything in the world. Faster underwater than on the surface, equipped with powerful batteries and streamlined hulls, they represented the future of submarine warfare. But the Soviet Union, now emerging as an uneasy post-war partner, demanded equal access. The Allies had agreed that technology and equipment would be shared, but trust was already thinning. Each nation wanted its own share of the submarines, its own slice of German engineering, and its own advantage in the unpredictable years ahead. Meanwhile, thousands of captured German submariners lived in temporary camps. Some were interrogated, especially engineers who understood new propulsion systems or advanced torpedo technology. As the weeks passed, the harbors only became more crowded. The U-boat fleet, once dispersed across the Atlantic, was now gathering in massive clusters. Finally, the Allies made their decision, one that would erase the U-boat fleet forever. The Allied solution was blunt, practical, and final. In the autumn of 1945, the Royal Navy launched a sweeping plan known as Operation Deadlight, an operation whose sole purpose was to erase the U-boat fleet from existence. More than 100 surrendered submarines were to be towed out into the North Atlantic and deliberately sunk. The plan was straightforward. 3 designated scuttling zones were drawn on charts roughly 100 to 120 nautical miles northwest of Ireland. Each U-boat would be taken there, one by one or in groups, and sunk by gunfire, explosive charges, or by simply opening their sea valves. It was industrial-scale disposal. But Operation Deadlight was anything but smooth. By November 1945, tugs and warships across Scotland and Northern Ireland began towing the U-boats out to sea. Many of these submarines had been damaged, sabotaged, or neglected. Their ballast tanks leaked like sieves. Their engines were seized. Their hulls were thin and brittle after months of combat patrols. And the North Atlantic in winter is unforgiving. Storms rolled in, pounding waves against the fragile steel. Towing cables snapped. Submarines pitched violently behind their escorts. Some began taking on water before they even reached open sea. In the end, it wasn't Allied gunfire that sank many of them. It was the ocean itself. More than a third of the designated U-boats, 56 in total, foundered or sank during towing. Those that did reach the scuttling zones met a quick end. British destroyers lined up and fired shells into the conning towers. Aircraft launched rockets. Charges were set inside hulls. Crews watched as submarines rolled, dipped, and disappeared beneath the waves, sometimes within minutes, sometimes agonizingly slowly. The operation continued through the bitter winter months. One by one, the remnants of the U-boat fleet vanished below the surface of the Atlantic. Finally, on February 7, 1946, the Royal Navy sank U-2511, Germany's only fully operational Type 21, at the moment of surrender. With its destruction, Operation Deadlight came to an end. In less than 6 months, the vast majority of the U-boat fleet, once the pride of the Kriegsmarine, was gone. Even as Operation Deadlight erased most of the fleet, a handful of U-boats, carefully selected, were spared. These were the Type 21 and Type 23 submarines, the cutting-edge designs that represented a fundamental leap forward in naval engineering. Unlike earlier U-boats, the Type 21 was built to fight underwater. It was faster beneath the waves than on the surface, boasted enormous batteries, and featured a sleek, hydrodynamic hull, decades ahead of its time. The Allies knew immediately. These submarines were the future. To manage the spoils, the Tripartite Naval Commission was formed in August 1945 to allocate the captured submarines between the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. Each nation received 10 U-boats, with priority given to the advanced models. This handover became one of the first moves in the chess game that would define the next half-century. Britain took several examples to study. One, U-3017 was renamed HMS N-41 and put through extensive trials. Royal Navy engineers examined its submerged endurance and its revolutionary historical system. Its design influenced British post-war submarines. The United States dismantled captured U-boats at naval laboratories. American crews inspected every aspect: propulsion, silent running features, and battery layout. One remarkable capture was U-234, which surrendered on May 14, 1945. This was bound for Japan with a secret cargo, including jet engine parts and uranium oxide. The U.S. Navy examined it exhaustively before sinking it in 1947. The data gathered shaped America's first generation of Cold War submarine classes. The U.S. also used captured subs as floating laboratories and target vessels. Canada even received one, U-190, which served as a training platform, helping Canadian crews understand anti-submarine tactics. The most dramatic shift occurred in the East. The Soviet Union eagerly took its allocated submarines and began copying them. Soviet engineers disassembled the Type 21 boats down to their plates. The result was a technological jump that helped create the Whiskey-class submarines, a major player in the early Cold War. By the late 1940s, the redistribution of U-boats had evolved from cooperation into competition. The technology Germany developed at the end of the war reshaped the submarine programs of all three major powers, becoming the foundation of modern undersea warfare and strategy during the Cold War. Even though Operation Deadlight destroyed most of the fleet and the rest were divided among the Allies, a tiny handful of U-boats escaped that fate, not through luck, but through circumstance, preservation, and the choices made long after the war ended. A few of these submarines became relics, physical reminders of the most intense undersea campaign in history. One of the most well-known survivors is U-505, captured intact in 1944 by the U.S. Navy. Because it was seized before the surrender, it avoided Deadlight entirely. After exhaustive study, it was preserved and eventually moved, painstakingly, to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Today, visitors walk through its narrow corridors, experiencing firsthand the cramped, claustrophobic life of a U-boat crew. It is one of the only German submarines on display anywhere in the world. Another survivor is U-534, raised from the seabed near Denmark in 1993. Its hull, ripped open by RAF depth charges, became a time capsule of late war technology and the desperation of its final mission. Today, it sits in Birkenhead, England, split into sections so visitors can view the interior from multiple angles. It represents not triumph, but the brutal reality of what these machines endured. U-995, preserved at Labo near Kiel in Germany, offers a different kind of legacy. As a Type 7, the workhorse of the German fleet, it stands as a memorial to both the submariners who served and the tens of thousands who died on Allied ships. Inside, the original radios, bunk spaces, and torpedo tubes remain. It's a reminder that the U-boat war was not just strategy and technology, but human endurance, fear, and sacrifice. And then there's U-2540, a Type 21, the future that arrived too late. Scuttled by its own crew in May 1945, it was raised in the 1950s and rebuilt as a research submarine by the West German Navy. Today it survives as the museum ship Wilhelm Bauer in Bremerhaven, Germany, the only example of its revolutionary class still in existence. Standing inside it, you see not the past, but the beginning of the modern submarine era. These surviving boats, just a handful out of more than 1,000, form the final chapter of the U-boat story. They're artifacts that escaped destruction, preserved not to celebrate the war, but to help us understand it. Their steel hulls hold the weight of millions of tons of lost shipping, the fear of convoys crossing the Atlantic, and the lives of young men on both sides who never came home. The rest lie silent on the ocean floor, rusting slowly in the dark, scattered across the North Atlantic. They're invisible now, but their legacy endures in every submarine that followed, every sonar ping, every tactic used in the Cold War, and every museum visitor who steps into the shadows of steel and remembers. The U-boat era ended in 1945, but the story it left behind lives on far longer beneath the waves.